Hey guys, this morning I'm going to talk about setting up an RDS database using the Amazon Web Services. That's a relational database service server from the Amazon Web Services cloud services. Anyway, previously we did a tutorial on setting up an EC2 server. So that would be your primary server for setting up a website. Or an API or whatever you may be setting up. It could be anything from a WordPress site to the back end of a game system. Anyway, today we're going to show you how to set up the database portion of the AWS and then connect that between the EC2 server and the database that you set up so that everything is working together. And we're going to do a quick PHP script that will read the database and then just kind of kick it out like an API would if you were to just, load the API off the page. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. And we'll start with signing in on the Amazon Web Services. We'll go back and review real quick on the EC2, and then we'll set up ourselves a RDS. Okay, so as before, we're going to do the typical sign-in. If you haven't already set up the EC2 server, I suggest you go through that tutorial, or go ahead and set one up if you already know how to do it. I'm going to go into my secondary account here. Oops. There we go. I have two accounts. One's my real account, and one's this account. For lack of a better term, a dummy account so that I can do tutorials. If you look at what we went through last time, we set up our EC2 server, which is our actual usable server with its running instance. So it's still running, and it's still running using that elastic IP address of 34.234.231.116. So we're going to go ahead and keep using that particular server. And we're going to go ahead and keep using that particular IP address. We can always register a domain and then point that domain system to this IP address if, in fact, we wanted to make this a publicly available domain. So let's see. We've got our instance. We've got our security groups. And we set that up so that we have our inbound. Remember, that was our firewall, which allowed us to allow HTTP in and the HTTPS in. Also, our secure shell to allow us to access the Linux terminal via, in our case, WebStorm or PHP Storm. In somebody else's case, that may be PuTTY or OpenSSH. Okay, so that's the EC2, and we have that server running. We've already gone through that on the previous tutorial and ran some stuff on it. This tutorial, we're going to go ahead and set up a relational database, a MySQL database, and then we're going to jump onto it, and we can use a number of design services to manage our database. I mean, whether it's the MySQL Workshop, I can't remember exactly what it's called. I've got it right here. Hold on just a second. Workbench. MySQL Workbench, which is free from the guys at Oracle. You can use, again, another JetBrains product called Data Grid. It's not free, but there is a 30-day download on it. And it represents more like the original MySQL server, the kind of enterprise interface, what they call their management studio for the SQL server. So it's a lot like that, except it will connect and manage any server, SQL server, instead of just the Microsoft SQL server. There's also, you could set up the PHP MyAdmin, or yeah, I think that's what it's called, MySQL MyAdmin. And there is a tutorial on how to do it in the LAMP section, though I haven't done it, and you'll have to, because it assumes So if you're looking at the AWS LAMP tutorial, right, and that's the tutorial we used to create the EC2 server. Toward the bottom, you can here's okay, so it's PHP MyAdmin. You can set this up to be used to use on a local MySQL. If you go into the setup configuration files, you can also set it up to use basically to any accessible MySQL server. So you could go in this direction if you are interested in it. So, you know, read through that, and if you want to set that up on your server and then use the MySQL or MyAdmin, then be my guest. In this particular case, we're going to be using PHP Storm, because we're going to do some PHP to kick out the API. I'll probably just interface with the database through my PHP Storm product. So it's got a lightweight database configuration system in it that allows me to just kind of jump on and like create a table and then create some rows, some data in that table. So we'll probably just use that. But if you need to manage a database and you need to get in there and hand alter database pieces and parts, I think the probably the easiest and of course the most affordable, because it's free, would be the MySQL Workbench, which you can get online. If you just look it up, I haven't downloaded it in a long time, though I use it. SQL Workbench. Not the tutorial, just the Workbench. There we go. Okay, so there you go. You can go to this mysql.com products workbench and download the 6.3 workbench, and it's there's no cost in the workbench, so you can just download it and use it. I may jump into it later in this tutorial just to get you familiar with it and do a little work around on our new database server. Anyway, let's get back to what we were talking about. So we'll come back to the EC2 server setup and set up an RDS. So you can go under services here and find the RDS. Also under services, you'll find it under database right here for the RDS. So this may be a history. So if you haven't gone to some of these things, the RDS is right here. All right. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and set up a relational database. Again, this is free if you have not already run your 1-year trial services. So we're going to look at instances. We're going to launch the database instance right here. And here are your choices. You've got the Amazon Aurora, which it claims is much faster than the MySQL. There has been some dispute about that, and it depends on how it's benchmarked. But you can look up those benchmarks and decide yourself. The Aurora is a MySQL compatible database. So in other words, you can use the exact same drivers and use the exact same commands, and it's supposed to be optimized a little better than the MySQL version. But it does cost money because there's a licensing on it above and beyond the standard server. So that's just simply up to you on how fast and how important that is to you. Same thing with the MariaDB. It's said to be faster as it is the original programmers from MySQL. You've got Postgres. You've got Oracle servers. Instead of the lighter community version of MySQL, you can go straight to the Oracle big server database servers, and of course you've got the big SQL server from Microsoft. And for most people, the SQL Server Express is fine. It's because it's a free server or a free database server for Microsoft. There's no licensing, so it can also fall under the free tier eligible system. But we want the MySQL Community Edition which is free tier eligible. As a matter of fact, these two are the only real large system databases, so that's why they're giving you whether it's free tier. I don't believe that the okay, so they've got it down here. So here's your free tier eligible there, free tier eligible there, free tier eligible there. This one is not free tier eligible, which is strange because it's actually the Amazon version. Anyway, so we're going to go and do a MySQL server. It's what I'm most used to. I don't know what the differences are in a lot of these database servers because, you know, just keeping up with the JavaScript and the PHP and, you know, every new framework, it's hard to keep up with databases as well as a freelance programmer. But I do know a little bit about them. I just know that I am most familiar with MySQL. So we're going to go ahead and select that MySQL, and we're going to do the test development version. And the real only reason is you can run the test dev as a primary server. You still get your backups. It still runs just like a standard database. The difference is that with the production version, you typically set up like multi-zone. So you'd have two zones, maybe on two different continents, where they were synced together, and you could never lose your database. You'd never lose sync of your database, theoretically, of course. But that two of them are synced together and two of them are running and available at any given time, two or more, really. And a much faster provisioned IOPS in, you know, as far as speed to get that information out of the database and to your server even faster. Again, primarily important for large data turnover. I've got very large storefronts that are still running off of this system right here because honestly, I've never seen one of their databases go down. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Obviously, they have the multi-zone system for that reason. But for myself, I've never seen their databases go down. And if they did, again, I can kick up a new snapshot in minutes. And the reliability is not needed for my customers, even in the storefront, to lose 5 minutes. Not at the cost, right? Because there's always a cost versus reliability, and we always measure that cost versus reliability. They may change their mind in the future and say, you know, 5 minutes cost us more than the entire year's worth of a larger double server system, and we constantly have to look at those factors. But in this case, we're going to do the test development series. And I just wanted to note that so that you would know that if you're actually putting up a development platform, a production platform, that you don't have to use their production recommendation. As a matter of fact, the whole reason we went through the EC2 system was to show how we don't have to do load balancing and we don't have to do scaling, so that we can keep a much cheaper, by half, cost of servers and still have a incredibly reliable system in comparison to what's available through the hosting services. Though we can always make it more reliable at a cost. All right, so we've picked the dev test. We're gonna hit next, and here's all the goody information in it. So we're gonna go ahead. We can do only show options that are eligible for the free tier, and that's fine. I'm going to show you what they are anyway. So we're going to run on the general public license, obviously. We're going to run the highest version of SQL, which in this case is 5.7.17. Instance class, we're obviously going to be running the T2 micro because that's the free eligible service. And multi-zone, again, that's to set up multiple servers. So obviously if we set up multiple servers, it wouldn't be free. We're going to use the general purpose SSD. We're going to go ahead and leave that at 5 gigabytes. We can always up the size of the hard drives. So it's better to start off with a reasonable sized which, like it says here, the minimum is 5 gigabytes. So you can't go less than 5 gigabytes. Might as well start at the minimum, and then you can allocate more memory as needed. In this case, up to 6,144 gigabytes. All right. So now if we switch this little switch on, you'll see that we basically picked everything that was already free tier eligible. Assume that's free tier eligible as well. Yes. Okay, it just resets that one DB Engine version. I don't know why. It's still free tier eligible. All right, and then of course under free tier eligible, you'll only get the micro-sized database. Do realize that the database is another entire server. In this particular case, you get it for a year for free, but after that year, you will be paying for both the database server and any other servers that you may use. Now, you can have a bunch of databases on this server, and up to the limit of how much the server can take, and then you're going to want to basically, look at the value cost of, multiple servers for different sets of functions versus just getting a bigger server that can handle more databases for whatever set you may be giving out. All right, so we're going to have a DB identifier, which is just the name. In this case, we're going to call it, let's call it, well, I've already done it once. Let's see if we can do it again. It may not let me do the same one. Master username, we're just going to put R. Simmons, put whatever you want to use as your username. And for the password, I'm just going to do 1234, 1234, and then 1234, 1234. All right. Hit the next step, and we're going to go ahead and create a new security group. The RDS needs a security group just like any server does to allow things in and out of it. So we're going to go ahead and let it automatically create a new security group. The security group is going to add only one thing, and it's simply going to add it's going to allow the MySQL server port through. So if we want the EC2 that we built to talk to the RDS, then on the RDS security group, we need to let that through, right? So we need to set its IP address to come through. If I want to access the database, then I need to let my local IP address through that security group. So we're going to go ahead and let that go ahead and auto create. And really what it does when it first auto creates is it does a MySQL port and allows that through. And the first thing it lets through is my personal IP address on my machine. So it knows what IP address this is coming from, and it's gonna set it to my IP address to access it. So we're going to go ahead and set up that new security group. The database name, we'll just call it a test DB. Database port, parameter group, option group. You can leave all those as default. We don't need to copy any tags. Tags are the ways to keep track of everything. They're not functional in any way other than just organization. We're going to no preference on the IAMDB authentication, and we don't have the option in the free tier or anything to enable encryption. So anything that you need to look up here, you can obviously look up the information. As you click on it, you're going to get some information here and learn more, etc. as you go through, plus the learn more. So it's going to take you to a system that's going to allow you to educate yourself farther and farther along as you feel necessary. All right, so your backup retention period is, how many days is it going to store a backup, because it does a daily backup. And I typically just leave it at 7 days. Your numbers may vary depending on your needs. You can select, what time it happens in the morning or whatever. So you can set it to interfere as little as possible with potential usage, because your database tends to get very slow while it's doing a backup process. And of course, enhanced monitoring is exactly like the EC2. You don't get more monitoring. In other words, you don't get more graphs. You just get the same graphs and they're allocated more often. All right. Auto minor version upgrade. Yes. So if there's, a minor version upgrade within the SQL Server software, yes, go ahead and just do that automatically. And then of course, maintenance window is the same thing as the other one. If you have a preference on time, like you want to set it at 3 o'clock in the morning, then that's perfectly fine. Just remember that we're living in a globalized world, and 3 o'clock in the morning, your time is not necessarily 3 o'clock in the world halfway across the world. So sometimes it doesn't really matter. It's always going to be difficult to set those. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we've got all that set. Again, if you have any questions or anything about that, just leave them in the comments below. So we're going to launch our database. And there we go. We have created our DB instance. Now it's going to take a little time to get up and running. And then once it's up and running, we'll get a link right here for connecting to it as soon as it gets far enough along in its creation. And it takes a couple of minutes, no more than 4 or 5 minutes to actually create the database. So once that's up, we'll go ahead and continue on, and then we'll connect to the database and load a little data on it, and then have our EC2 server connect to it and kick it out. It's just like a website would. Okay, so now that we've got our database up and running, and we've got a connection point, this is our connection point. So whether we're using a Workbench, a database IDE, or PHP or PHP Storm, this is the public address of it, and this is the port. So you'll strip the port off anytime you put that into whatever you may use. Okay, so that's our instance. When you load these pages, this is kind of how the instance shows up, just like this. So you can use this down arrow to look at its memory, storage, and CPU usage, and then the thresholds for each one in the monitoring. Okay, and of course, make sure that your status is available. As it loads, it will, or as it's created, it will say, creating, and then it does an immediate backup. So as you can see, it does a real quick snapshot backup of the database as soon as it's created. So just remember that, and then it'll create a backup every day associated with that retention, and if you set the times. Okay, so our database is created, it's running, and it's all good. Now, if we go back over to the EC2 where we created our server, we can see that we have our running instance server right here, but it won't be able to talk to that database until we set the security group for it. So now we've got 3 security groups. We had the main one we set up on the previous tutorial, and its inbound let us have HTTP come into that server. And we also set up HTTPS, and of course the secure socket shell, so that we can use a terminal to get into that the Linux terminal. But the one that we created was this RDS launch wizard. Now, as you create more and more of these for whatever reason, you can label them as necessary. All right. So that's obviously something that may become important if you create a number of these. Now, on our RDS wizard, the security group for the RDS, it presets this MySQL Aurora port, TCP port. And this number right here, if you did it, will be your IP address. Now, I quickly changed mine because I don't want my static IP address to my computers and my systems here to be publicly available. But that will end up being your IP address and then 32 behind it for the CIDR, which is the range. All right, so 32 means 1, equates to 1. All right, so anytime you add an IP address, you need to put the /32 behind it. If you're looking at a range of IP addresses, then you'll need to look up what the CIDR is and how it allocates ranges for hosts. All right, but just remember that. So If in fact this is my IP address and I want to let the EC2 IP address through as well, then I can go back to my EC2 dashboard, look at my EC2, and right here we want the private address. We don't want that public address. We want its private IP address. So we could do that, hit Control C and copy that, come down to our security group under our RDS. We could edit this and add a rule. Now this of course is redundant because I've already let everything through, but under the MySQL right here, not MSQL, MySQL, we can put in that right there. Again, remember, /32. All right. And then this is new, which is really nice because when you have one of these letting through a number of different servers, there used to not be a way to describe what port, what this IP address was allocated to. Now I can just put in main server EC2. All right, so now if I save that, I think it'll let me. Yeah, okay. I thought maybe it wouldn't let me because I'm already letting everything through. Why would I pigeonhole the single IP address here? But if this is your IP address with the /32 so that you can talk to the RDS, you'll need to add the EC2 private IP address as well. All right. So you can obviously do this right here. That opens your server, your database server to the world. So anybody can write a SQL if they can get a hold of the instance. So the connection to the instance right here. And of course, it is username and password protected. So they'd need this information. They need the username. They need the password, and that's really all you need because then you could use something to get the database names. But again, they would have to have that information. But as of right now, because we just set that if we go to EC2 and look at the security groups. As of right now, we can connect to the database both through a Workbench or through the EC2 server itself. And one of the nice things is if this is set to your IP address, which it does automatically, then if you're running a local development platform such as XAMPP or WAMP or whatever, MAMP, I think is one for Macintosh, you can still use this database. So you don't really have to do the whole, oh, here's my local platform. Now I have to set up a local database. Now I have to set up a local this. You can use that remote database, set up a database on that server for testing use, and then use it with your local development platform. So it's one less thing that you have to kind of set up for local development. You can wipe out and create new databases on that remote server at will. And just by setting your local connection, PDO connection or MySQL connection or whatever you're doing, if you're doing PHP, it'll connect to that remote server just as anything would. But we're going to go ahead and use the EC2, and I'm going to go ahead and bring in PHP Storm right now so that we can go ahead and connect both to our database and we can connect to our remote server, not the database server, but our EC2 server. And then we'll script out a PHP script real quick and show that it is in fact working. So I'm going to show you real quick here. I've got my, this is PHP Storm. You'll notice it looks virtually the same as WebStorm, but it has two primary enhancements, and that's the fact that it does IntelliSense for PHP and has some testing and breakpoint and all that for the PHP scripting. It also allows me to connect to a database and do light work on that database with its database connection. So the first thing that I'm going to do now, that we have both our EC2 and our RDS up and running, and they're completely usable, is I'm going to go ahead and bring this in, and I'm going to go ahead. I've already created a project, just a blank project. There's nothing special about it. As a matter of fact, when you do this, you're just doing a new project, and I'm picking an empty PHP project. You can set these or not. It's irrelevant because we're not going to do any testing at this point. These are for testing levels, and you have to have a local version of PHP on your machine. In this case, I have it with my XAMPP local development platform. But it's just an empty project, and you name the project and hit create, and that's all I've done. There's nothing special about it. All right, so let's go ahead and right off the bat, let's go ahead and connect to our brand new RDS server. So down in this bottom left, we've got our mini windows. So, you know, this is the project manager right here, which is this. And then right here, we got the database, which is what we want right there. So very similar to what we looked at for the remote hosts. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and bring up, you've seen me do that. Let's go ahead and use our tools, deployment, and browse remote host. We've done this in WebStorm. Now we're doing it in PHP Storm. Where are you? Remote host, right here. So we've got it on that right-hand side. It's just fighting me a little bit, maybe the screen resolution or something. But no big deal, it's right there. It's not glitchy at all, I promise you. Okay, so we've got the AWS, we'll just call it main server. And just like before on the previous tutorial, we're connecting to it with the PEM key. Our remote host was, if we look right here for our EC2 dashboard. So here's our IP address right here, copy. And if we go back down here to this one, yes. There we go. So we've copied our IP address in. We've got that. Remember our root path. If we wanted the entire server structure, we could leave that as it is, but we're going to go ahead and go into the HTML. Knew that didn't look right. HTML. Username is always EC2-user for the Amazon Linux AMI. Password, again, is going to be that key pair authentication, which you save to your computer. Just go back to the, in this case, I saved it on my desktop. Just go back through the tutorial. If at any point the previous tutorial on EC2, if any of this is getting you lost. Mappings, we're going to go ahead and put that / in, just like we talked about, and the fact that it can't deploy anything from here to here without that / in the map deployment. Okay, so we're all set up. We hit OK, and here's our remote host. And exactly how we left it from the last tutorial with that simple index page and the PHP info. Now we've got nothing over here because I created a new project. The last project was done in WebStorm. This one's done in PHP Storm. And while I could simply have opened the WebStorm version in PHP Storm, I decided to start a new project. So right off the bat, we're just going to go ahead and download these two files right here right into our project. And that was as simple as what it was. It says hello world, and this is my AWS server. So if we go back to our server, we can, this remembers, yeah. There's our server IP address. If I hit enter, there's that page. And if we do that / PHP info, then we get the PHP configuration. I do remember that during the setup process, we do these to test. We do the PHP info.php echo to test to make sure that Apache has permission rights, and certainly to get some information if we need to from the PHP info.php, so we can get some information about what's running on the system. But we don't want to leave that up because that would certainly be a security breach. It's got way too much information in here about your server and other information that somebody with malicious intent could use against you. So do remove that from your server once you decide to turn it into a production server. Alrighty, so that gets us the index file and the PHP file that we saw right here. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to jump onto the database. So we just created that database from down here. Goodness gracious. How many file transfers? Interesting. Okay. So there we go. There's our database. There's our remote host. If you can't find it, it'll be down in this corner right here. So just hover over it and it'll bring up all your different abilities. And here's our database. So now we're going to connect a new database. New database source is going to be a MySQL database. All right. And our host is not local. We're going to go back to our management console here, RDS, instance, MySQL, and there's our public domain information for that. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of bring this over here for right now, and then I'm not sure that. There we go. Let's see. So under the host, we're going to paste that, get rid of our port because our port is actually right here. The database, we named it as testdb. The user was R. Simmons in my case, whatever you may have used. The password was 12341234. All right. This you can leave as blank, and we can test the connection. If your driver shows that it's not up to date, there'll be a button here that you can click, and it'll just download the latest drivers for MySQL. So we can test that, and we have a successful connection to the database. So we can just hit OK, and there we go. There is our database. Now, let me see here real quick. I can bring up my Workbench. That one takes a little time, so. Okay, so I wanted to bring up this. This is the Workbench, the MySQL Workbench. So what I did was I just really quickly deleted all my different connections to it because they're real simple to put back up. So if I want to create a connection, this is how your Workbench will show up after you install it from MySQL. And you can just hit plus. The connection name would be the AWS RDS Server. Standard TCP/IP, host name. Again, use that connection name they gave us too, same port. Username is R. Simmons. We can store the password in the vault, 12341234. All right, and default schema, we're gonna leave that blank. Well, we'll just put testdb. It doesn't matter, you're gonna see in a second. We're gonna test the connection. Sure enough, it makes connection. We hit OK, and that now sets us up a little button on our connection dashboard to connect to our database. So now we've opened the database right down here. I can't really move this around, so I've got kind of a lot of minimized space. But this is the MySQL Workbench, so you can work down here in your database system. So if you wanted to create a table, you could create a table. You know, addresses, plural, always plural when you're doing database tables. All right, you can put some comments in it. You can leave all this default. You know, you've got your columns. So am I split here? Yeah. So, goodness, I've got a lot of space issues here. There's our output. There we go. Okay, so under column name we can do ID, int, and of course it's going to be primary key, not null, unique. auto increment. This is bit, unsigned bit, generated column. Auto increment will automatically make it a generated column. Okay. And here you would just do, you know, address 1, yeah, varchar 45 is fine. Address 2, varchar 45 is fine. You could do city, state, and zip. All right. And then, of course, our ID is our primary key. So we hit apply. That should allow us to do that. Okay. So now we've got a table under there for addresses. And if we wanted to work on that, we could just, you know, PO Box 888-999-555. Montgomery, Texas 77356. All right, and then apply, finish. So now you can see how we're adding data to the database. If I run my select again, my data is in there and it auto-generated the ID. We left that as null because we didn't not null any of these. And that's personal preference when you're designing databases. A lot of people will really strict up their databases so that it'll error out if there's bad information in it. Just remember that that can cause some problems down the road. If you're running a production piece of software and you're getting errors on your database, kickback errors on your database, sometimes that's really hard to track down off the production software. So a lot of times I'll leave these as null, and if it errors into a piece of information, I'll let it error, and then we'll catch that on the back end. But that's completely up to you. You can make these as tight and stringent as you want to by not null and then forcing them to only accept the data type and length that is required. But just make sure that you do all your error traps and everything on your front end software if you do that. Okay. So that's what we've got there. I want to show you the Workbench, but we're going to go ahead and go on from the Workbench. Now realize the Workbench on a larger screen, instead of a 720p screen, wouldn't have had that problem. This was a problem created when I created the table. It wouldn't have had that problem because my other screens over here are set much bigger, obviously. This screen is just set small for the purpose of the video recordings. Okay, so now I can obviously refresh this, and my test DB will show our addresses that we created in the Workbench. But let's go ahead and create a new one on using PHP Storm. We're going to create a new table, and it's going to be users, no comment. We're going to add a column for the ID. It's going to be an int, no default. Not null, auto sync, unique, primary key. We're going to add first name, which will be a varchar. And I'm just going to use 255. We're going to go ahead and leave these blank. Another one, we'll do last name. And we'll make it a varchar, 255. All right. And we'll get rid of that one. All right. Now, when we hit execute, it will do the same thing. It'll just execute that onto the database. And now we have a users. In PHP Storm, I can do the same thing. I can bring that up. Using the add button, I can put Robert Simmons. I can add another one here. I can do John Doe. I can add another one, John Smith. Add another one here. I can do Jane Doe. There we go. So we'll just add those. Now as you can see, they're green. They haven't been submitted, so we just pump that up real quick and we've submitted them in. So now that database has that information in it as well. So if we come back over here and we refresh our database, we now have users, and we can look at that one. let's bring this over here. So if we bring this over here, goodness, I was working on the wrong screen with a tutorial. When we saw this, we had the addresses here under our workbench. We could do tables here. We could hit refresh all. That would refresh it, bring up users. Under users, we could bring up that, and that brings up our users. So there you go. And we created this in PHP Storm. And of course, we create the addresses in the workbench I just pulled offline. All right. So now we've got the database up and running. We've got a little data in it. Let's go ahead and write a little bit of PHP. So I'm going to come over here to our remote host. We know our database is here. One of the nice things is with this is as you start to use PHP, it will key into these. So as you're using the database portion of PHP and writing the PDO or MySQL or whatever drivers you use, it will ensure that they're the same, right? So when you're referencing a table name, it will make sure it matches the table name that is sitting on this on this remote database connection right here. All right. So we're going to go ahead and create a. Let's clean this up real quick. Let's clean that up. We'll clean that up, and get rid of our index. We'll just use it like we were creating an API. So we're using PHP file, and we're just going to call it get users.php. And you don't have to add PHP. It doesn't make any difference. All right. So from here, I am going to pull up a little template over here on my other side that I already created. And we're going to do, whoops, server name equals. And we're going to copy that original server. Let's see what the last thing I copied was. Yep, there it is. So there's our server name. All right. And then we can do username. We know that one is R. Simmons. Yours may differ. We can do password. And it was 1234, 1234. All right. And we will do DB name, which is test DB. All right. Now, we are going to do a try function on this particular case. And then, of course, we're going to do a catch. And the catch will be the PDO exception error. And we'll just type this out real quick. Error. All right. So in our try, we just need to set up our connection. We're going to use PDO connection equals new PDO. And we're going to do MySQL host equals server name. And DB name equals DB name, the variable. All right. Then we need the username and the password. Good enough. All right, so on the connection, then we need to set the attributes. You can do this. You don't have to. I like to because I like to see my errors. All right, PDO. Oops, error mode. There we go. Okay, now we've got the statement. Now we're going to do our select statement in our prepare. So we're preparing our select statement. We're going to select its ID, first name, and last name from users. All right. And then we're going to execute the statement. Good enough. Now that's going to actually do our select on the database. Now we just need to grab the results and then echo them out to the page, because all we're going to do is load this page and then just have them dump it to the page. And we'll start with a basic array. So we'll do a result equals statement fetch all. Yep, that's why I didn't do it. I was wondering why my IntelliSense wasn't working. And it was telling me fetch all. There we go. And we're going to do a PDO. And we're going to do fetch associate. Associative. All right. And we're going to echo an H1. This is that. There we go. And we're just going to pre that. If you don't know what pre is a way of whatever format it gets is how it sticks it out instead of formatting it per the HTML. All right. Then we're going to dump our result. All right, and then add another and our pre tag. All right. Good enough. Now, of course, we're creating this locally, so we still need to get it up here because it's not up on our main server yet. So let's go ahead and bring it up. So in PHP Storm, now you can be doing this in anything. You just, however you talk to your remote servers in a host environment, you do have to remember that this is, when we're talking to an EC2 server, we're using SSH for our secure shell. If you're doing, you know, FTPS and you still need to talk to that RDS will talk to whatever server you want to. As you can see, we're talking to it from home. So you don't even need, there's nothing elaborate needed. If you're doing it from some hosting service and you want to use the AWS RDS databases, then you're more than welcome to. And you may be FTPing this information up to your server. So however you do that, just do that. In my case, we're doing it on an EC2. So, all right, so we're gonna upload to the AWS server. And there we go. Now we've got our, you know, gateway, API, whatever you want to call it. And it's just gonna dump it out, hopefully, to the screen. So let's bring this over here to the right-hand side. And on our document, if we / get users, all right, yeah, .php. There we go. Well, there you go. So now we have a complete working database. We're going backwards and forwards to the call to the RDS, and then the RDS is answering back. This is the database. It's making a call. I mean, this is the EC2 right here. It's making a call to the RDS. The RDS is returning the information per this remote host, per this script right here. And then, you know, just for the sake of most people and how they work with JavaScript, we'll bring that out in JSON format. So we'll do a BR and another BR. Just give us a little room to the next level so we can bring it down. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do this right here. We'll bring the we'll put the JSON information in first, so that it's since it's typically I say used more often than just kicking back an array these days. So this is the JSON format. All right. Echo. And then we're just gonna, we don't need a pre or anything, so we're just gonna, we're gonna JSON encode. And it'll be the results. All right. And you'll notice that PHP Storm is tossing up some IntelliSense and helping me out a little bit. But if you don't have any type of PHP IntelliSense, depending on what software you're using, and most of them do, I mean, whether you're using anything from Dreamweaver to VS Code, Sublime, you name it, Atom, most of them have some type of IntelliSense or a plugin that allows you to have PHP IntelliSense. So that's that, and then we'll just echo out some breaks, BR, so that we have a little room. All right. Now again, I'm still working locally. I'm not working remotely. So under my project, I still need to take my file and upload it. So it's uploaded. Now if we refresh this, we've got our JSON formatted data coming out. And then below it, like I said, a couple breaks and then the original data that we had below it. So, and that's working off your RDS. So, we got some connections here. I do need to remember to null out my connection. So if we haven't done that. So at the end of the call, got so many screens working here. We've got to do a connection equals null. All right, and that ensures that you're not, every single time you run something, you're not creating a new connection. So as you saw here, on our database, if we open that up, here's our connections, and I've already got 2 connections running. Now in this particular case, one of the connections is probably the Workbench, and the other connection is probably the PHP Storm light database connection. So that's probably my 2 connections I have up and running at this time, as they're still running. Okay, so if we refresh this and kill the connection, and actually, let me PHP Storm, because that would need to be uploaded with the new connection equals null. And rerun that. And that will kill that secondary connection. But yeah, I'm still sure that one of them is the Workbench that I have running up, and the other one is the actual connection with the PHP Storm. So if you have any questions on that really kind of wraps it up. We've got the database running. You've learned how to use the security groups to allow things into your database. So we've allowed specifically our EC2 in right here. This would normally be your personal IP address so that you can connect up to it. If you have a dynamic IP address on your home computer or on your work computer or primary work router, then this may, it may change on you, and then all of a sudden you won't be able to connect. So do remember that you may need to jump into this web interface and change this if your IP addresses change. And you can always get your IP address by just doing what's myip.org. When you hit that, it will tell you what your current IP address is. All right? And then that would be the number that goes right here, and then with your /32. Always /32 unless you know what you're doing and you're changing the host spread. All right? I think that covers us. Let's go ahead and on our instances, just for the sake that we haven't done it so far, we've got a main server right now that's really blank. It's a LAMP server. It's brand new. Everything's up to date on it. One of the things that we can do is go ahead under Actions and create an image. So if we wanted to create an image, we can call this a EC2 Server and generic lamp stack. All right. And you can always hit no reboot. So if you're running off a production server and you're trying to do a backup, or you start to get, a server gets glitchy, but you can't really afford for it to be down, you can do a no reboot, and it'll still do an image of it. It takes a little bit longer, and it's not guaranteed to be perfect. So you have to remember those things. If you can't do a reboot, sometimes you know it's what you have. If you've got to get them back up quickly, but that's what it's saying. The integrity of the created image cannot be guaranteed. But I've had to do it a number of times, and I've never had any problem with it. All right, so we create the image, close that, and then under our AMIs, you'll see that our backup is being created. So, and this would just be our generic lamp stack. So now you can see that if you wanted to actually create a number of these, or just keep it as a template, you've got your generic lamp stack, and then of course once this is created, the status on it is finished, which will take 60 seconds or so. You can launch these at will, and you don't have to go back through doing the starting up the lamp server and putting on Apache and putting on MySQL and putting on PHP. You can just, here's your generic one, and just kick them up at will. As a matter of fact, if my primary server failed at this point, this is an exact duplicate with those same 3 files on it. It's got the get users PHP, it's got index.html, index.html, and that PHP info.php. So it's an exact copy of the original server at the point that I'm making the image. And you can do that for your backups. You can do that for whatever you need to do, but it's really great for if you're creating a generic server that you want to start up. So let's say you create a WordPress, a brand new WordPress with nothing on it but WordPress, and everything is set generically, or that you preset the stuff that you want to preset. You can just save it right here and just leave it ready to go as an image. All right. So that's the nice thing on the backup system on that. There's a lot of stuff here, so there's a lot of stuff you can learn, but I'm just trying to get you through the fun parts. Here's your hard drive. There's the snapshot of the hard drive. We've gone through the security groups. We've gone through elastic IPs and how we can move those. So if I bring up that snapshot, because I need to for whatever reason, I can come to this elastic IP address right here, and I can associate the address to a different server if I wanted to, and then of course I need to connect that. So I need to check that, and then it would associate across. So I can move that IP address at will. So if you're running a registered domain, and that domain pointer is showing to your IP address, you can move that IP address as you feel necessary. Our key pairs, that's the fingerprint code. That's the code so you can talk to your server, since we don't use FTP. All right. If there's any other questions, be sure and put them in the comments. We can do snapshots as well for your RDS, though it's not really required because you get a nightly backup for 7 days. But if you wanted a generic, pre-set up T2 micro, you could do it. But you saw how easy it was to just launch a regular database. And I really think that about covers us. We went over the Workbench. We went over PHP Storm's interface. We created some data on the databases. We connected the database using EC2, and we connected to the database, obviously, from our home computers. Or my case, a home computer, and in your case, it may be a work computer or a home computer, or you may be sitting in Starbucks. I don't know. Anyway, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like. If you dislike the video, please leave a comment and let me know why you disliked it so I can improve it. We've been doing a number of things, or I've been doing a number of things to improve the quality of these videos, including the sound, the audio with the boom mic and professional audio interfaces. We've gone to 16:9 resolution, aspect ratio with a 720p resolution to try and make that usable on the smallest screen as possible. Any other thoughts that you may have, just put them in the comments, and of course subscribe if you want to see what's coming up next. And I think that just about covers it. Thanks guys, keep coding. We'll see you next time. Bye.